Welcome to episode 1475 of the Multifamily Collective. Today I wanted to talk about the future of search, future of multifamily search. And I'm going to glance down because I took up a couple notes from a podcast I was listening to earlier today. The Marketing Against the Grain, I believe, is the name of the podcast. For those of you who'd like to go back and listen to this episode. But one of the things that they said today, which they have said in the past, and I think I've actually said here on the podcast based on prior episodes of Marketing on the Grain, but as GPT, Bard, others get more embedded in the search experience today, it's not great, right? It yields results that are chunky and messy and full of hallucination and summarized, but the summarized versions, because companies like Google don't want to be called out for plagiarism, the summarized versions of scraped data are just terrible, and so on and so forth. But anyway, the future of search is, in the past, let's go back to the past for a second. So the way that your website or your presence online gets thrust into the SERP is based on some backlinking that happens from credible sources. So the more your website or the more your social presence is linked up to credible sources outside of your own website, so a lot of other websites, credible websites, point to your website, then you are a legitimate result in a search engine. So that's the past. The future is still being architected. And even the smartest people in the room don't necessarily know how large language models and generative AI are actually embedded into a search experience is actually yielding the result. They don't necessarily know how that's really happening. What is happening there to make that result come up? And so the speculation is that you're really beholden to um, influencing the ChatGPT models. And really, the race right now is understanding how to influence those GPT models or those LLMs, but Bard, GPT, others. How do you influence those engines, those data sets to yield you as a result? So if you think about search engine marketing as it relates to apartments, so if you type in apartments in Midtown Atlanta, uh, it yields links based on all those things that we just talked about, right? The historical reference for how search works. Obviously, that's not a complex analysis of how search works, but generally speaking, it's how search works. But in the future, when you use a chat model to input a search into an engine that is influenced by a chat, how does that chat? You have to go about figuring out how to influence that chat engine, that LLM data set to yield you as a result, which will come up in the way of images, summaries, possibly and likely some links and other things, right? It's going to yield a result, but how do you make sure today that you are prefacing or you're sort of baking in the data that's going to make you one of those yields in the future? That's highly fascinating to me. And they suggested in the podcast that it's still being figured out. And even the smartest people in the room at Google and other places don't necessarily know how that yield is working today. So it'll be fascinating to see what comes to be. But their direction right now is, hey, look, everything you can do to make sure all the back office stuff, the metadata, the tags, all the traditional things that you've been doing up to this point in time, continue to do them, double down on them, make sure that you're not missing any little detail, because that, at least for now, is the speculation that will still have some level of importance, some level of weight will be put on all those things. And then there'll be other things, right, that will have weights on them that when all combined will yield the results. So it's interesting. It's the wild, wild west right now. Who knows, we're effectively 6 months into this sort of chat GPT revolution or this generative AI revolution. And, in the early innings of Google setting up, the rules of the road for SEO, it took several, I think they mentioned that it took 18 to 24 months before that really caught fire. And the speculation is that time frame will be obviously reduced with LLMs, but it's going to take some time, but not too much time. So be on the ready, be on the lookout, make sure you're keeping yourself educated. Take care. We'll talk to you again soon.